Good evening and welcome to the Langley Adams Library in Groveland. Tonight we have two National Park Rangers with us, Santidra and Tatiana. And we are going to travel the Black Heritage Trail, Boston's Black Heritage Trail, which takes us basically from slavery through emancipation. Talking about some of the leaders and the history, and I also just wanted to mention a couple upcoming programs. One that will be February 25th. Kevin Comtois, a speaker from Northern Essex Community College, and he will be sponsored by them, the Speakers Bureau. And that will be from slave songs to hip hop, the evolution of American music. And then at Nichols Village, Katie Mason, a local author, will be speaking, and that will be on February 27th. And I'm looking forward to tonight's presentation. So thank you everyone for coming, and thank you, and I give it to you.
All right, good afternoon. Good evening, everyone. My name is Santidra Joseph. I work for Boston African American National Historic Site. We're located right in downtown Boston in Beacon Hill. And today, like she was saying, I will tell about the Black Heritage Trail, which is originally, when we take the trail, as a 1.6 mile walk through the Beacon Hill neighborhood, talking about the abolitionist movement. But today, I'm just going to bring the trail to you. So this is how the trail usually looks. It travels right through the Beacon Hill neighborhood. This is mainly being the downtown area, Boston Commons, the State House. Pretty much everything happened to the back of the State House. That's the Beacon Hill, north slope of Beacon Hill. Massachusetts has actually an interesting history. It was actually one of the first English colonies to bring over slaves in 1630. They're the first place to also, 1638. They're also the first place to also put laws in place for slavery by 1641. However, they're also the first state to end slavery by 1783. And the way that they go about ending slavery is that you have a woman by the name of Monbet. At the end, you actually get around this time, is at the end of the American Revolution. And Massachusetts comes up with their own state constitution. And in that state constitution, it's stated, all men are born free and equal. And when she heard this constitution being recited by her master, and she thought it was applied to her. So she went out one day, she contacted an attorney, and she sued her master. And she won her freedom in 1781. And then she started to tell other slaves, sue your master based on the state constitution. That's when you get the Massachusetts Supreme Court ruling in 1783 that Massachusetts is slavery in Massachusetts is unconstitutional. So that's how we get this free black community of Beacon Hill settling on the north slope of Beacon Hill. They also settle in other major port cities like Nantucket, New Bedford, and also Salem. The neighborhood was remarkable. You get remarkable people starting the Underground Railroad, playing a major role in this neighborhood. You also get people fighting against the slavery institution. This man right here, his name is Lewis Hayden. To me, he's one of the most remarkable people on the hill. And that's because he sets up his house as a safe house. And his house is considered to be the safest safe house on the whole Underground Railroad system. And the reason that he gets that title is because he saves a couple by the name of William and Ellen Craft. William and Ellen Craft are from Macon, Georgia. And they escaped slavery by taking the fastest mode of transportation. And the fastest mode of transportation around the 1850s is what?
Horse. No?
No, fastest.
1850s.
Yeah, around the 1850s.
Train.
That's right. These two are able to board the train. And the way that they're able to board the train is that Ellen Craft is fairly light-skinned. Her mother is half black and half white, and her father is actually her slave master. So you get her easily passing for white. And that's what she did. She passed herself as a young slave master, disguising herself as a man, putting on a top hat, bandaged up her arms, bandaged up her throat. And she also informs her husband, William, that he's going to play as her slave. And if anybody wants to stop them, William would actually need to step up and tell the person that they're going to the north for medical help. And the reason that he will need to step up is because Ellen Craft is also playing deaf. And also, she has a bandage around her throat also, so she wouldn't be able to speak also. Because we know if she was to speak, she'll first of all sound like a woman. Not only that, she'll be sound uneducated. So these two are able to board the train. They board the train and they don't really get major stops. The major stops they do get is when they reach Baltimore. They have to get on a train to transfer over to Philadelphia. And that's when the train conductor stops them and saying, "Sir, I cannot allow you and your slave to board this train. For the simple fact of we're entering a free territory. Your slave might try to get away from you." What Ellen Craft says, she does nothing. She says nothing to the guy. Because she knew her plan was working. The guy addressed her as "sir." So that's when you get William Craft actually stepping up and telling the train conductor, "This is my young slave master." And the train conductor lets them go on their way to freedom. And they make their way to Boston. They make their way to the Beacon Hill neighborhood. And William Craft actually hides at Lewis Hayden's house. Ellen Craft actually stays around the corner. But it's 1850 again. What happens in 1850? The Fugitive Slave Law. The Fugitive Slave Law allows slave masters and slave catchers to hire bounty hunters and slave catchers to go to the north to get these said fugitive slaves. So William and Ellen Craft are no longer safe in Boston. So these slave catchers actually come knocking on Lewis Hayden's door. Well, like I said, Lewis Hayden is a remarkable man. He hated the slavery institution. So when they come knock on his door, he does not let these slaves out freely? No. He actually opened the door with a loaded shotgun and a lit candle. He informs the slave catchers, "You can attempt to enter my house, but I'm going to be forced to let off a shot." Not only that, but he's going to drop that candle. And while he says that, he steps back and he reveals that he has 2 kegs of gunpowder at the doorway of his door. And these slave catchers turn around and leave Lewis Hayden's house. They don't try to enter. For some fact of they was not willing to die that day. So that's how he gets that title as being the safest safe house on the whole Underground Railroad system. Let me tell you a little back history into Lewis Hayden and what really made him, what fueled his fire of hating the slavery institution. Is that Lewis Hayden actually was born in Lexington, Kentucky. He escaped Lexington, Kentucky with his second wife, Harriet, and her son. They actually make their way to Canada. Because his first wife and child was actually sold further south. Sold to a guy by the name of Henry Clay. Henry Clay is the author of that fugitive slave law. So Lewis Hayden himself, he actually makes his way to Canada, but he hears about this Boston neighborhood, and he feels that this is a better place for him to do his work. So that's what fueled his fire of hating the slavery institution. Not only that, the next stop we'll bring you to is the African Meeting House. The African Meeting House was remarkable in this community. It was the overall heartbeat of the Beacon Hill neighborhood. You have many things happening here. One overall purpose of it was being a church. Blacks were allowed to go to church with whites, but they're being forced to sit in the balcony and in the back. And church around this time is a major social element. So if you feel like a social outcast, the best thing to do is to start your own. You get a guy by the name of Thomas Paul starting the first African Baptist church in the basement of Faneuil Hall in 1805. But when this building is finally constructed by the black community in 1806, you get the black church moving right here. And this church is also considered around this time to be the first black church above the Mason-Dixon line. So the first black church in the north. But not only did it serve the purpose of a church, but you actually get them putting a schoolroom in the basement in 1808. The school was called the African Private School. And it lasted there from 1808 up until 1835. Because in 1835, you have this building being built, the A.B.O. Smith School. This building was the first building in the whole country solely to educate black students. But if you have a building solely to educate black students, you have that separate but equal clause coming into play. That if it's separate, it should always be equal. But we notice throughout history, throughout life, that separate may sometimes never equal. So you actually had the ABL Smith School having overcrowded classrooms, having about 75 students to 1 teacher ratio when the school first opened. Not only that, but the teachers are not being paid on time, and the worst of the problem was the principal. The principal was abusive to the students and their parents. So you get this community boycotting the ABL Smith School. And when they boycott the school, they send the students right back into the original place of education. And that's the basement of the African Meeting House. But while they're boycotting, they're also fighting for school integration. And one way they try to fight is by suing the city of Boston. Sarah Roberts versus the city of Boston. This case is started by her father, Benjamin Roberts. Sarah Roberts was denied access to pretty much all white schools in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. She only was forced to walk to the ABL Smith School. But with those unfair conditions, Benjamin Roberts wanted her to attend one of these white-only schools. But they tell him no, based on the color of her skin. And this promotes him to sue the city of Boston. And he sues the city of Boston with the help of a guy by the name of Robert Morse and Charles Sumner. Robert Morse is Massachusetts' first black attorney, but Robert Morse knew that he could not trial this case completely by himself, so that's why he gets the help of Charles Sumner. Charles Sumner is actually later on become U.S. Senator Charles Sumner. These two men, they go in there and they argue the case that separate but equal is not actually equal. That you're doing our kids dishonor by segregating them. Mind you, those are the same arguments used in the Brown versus the Board of Education case in 1954. But the difference between this 1849 case and 1954 is that in 1849, the judge ruled against them. The judge ruled separate but equal is equal. But however, that does not end the struggle for this neighborhood. You actually get a guy by the name of William Cooper Nell, who helps organize the mothers in this neighborhood to go to cities outside of Boston, those other major port cities that I talked about. And he gets petitions from other parents stating that there's nothing wrong with my son and daughter going to school with a black student. And the reason he's able to get these petitions is because in those neighborhoods, they have free black communities, but they also had an integrated public school system. Boston was just one of the last places to do so. So with these petitions, he does not go up to the city, he goes straight to the state. And that's when you get the state legislature passing in 1855 that all Massachusetts public schools must be integrated. So technically, Massachusetts actually integrates their school systems 99 years before the rest of the country is forced to do so with the Brown versus the Board of Education case. Anybody have any questions or anything midway through? No? All right, so we can continue. As the years progress on, you actually get the Civil War breaking out. And the Civil War, when it first breaks out in 1861, Abraham Lincoln, who's the president at the time, does not allow blacks to fight on his side. Lincoln feels that the war is not about ending slavery, but about preserving the Union. However, southern states left the Union for states' rights. States' rights, too, have slaves. So it depends on which way you look at it, the war is somewhat about slavery. So finally, 2 years into the war in 1863, he comes up with the Emancipation Proclamation. And in that proclamation, it freed the slaves in the Confederate States, but furthermore, it allowed blacks to fight in the Army. That's how you get the recruitment of the Massachusetts 54th Regiment, which was the first all-black regiment to leave from the North during the Civil War. However, if you had an all-black regiment, you couldn't have a black leader. So that's how you get Robert Gashar leading the men of the 54th. Robert Gashar is from a prominent Beacon Hill neighborhood. When first actually lead the regiment, he actually says no. However, through the persuading of his mother, that's when he finally says yes. Because his mother was a known abolitionist in that neighborhood. So these men are mainly known for fighting the Battle of Fort Wagner. Fort Wagner was one of the big Confederate forts in South Carolina. But however, these men could not take the fort. They do major damage to it, but they did not win the battle. But however, they do win the hearts of the Northern public. They proved to the North that blacks had what it takes to fight in the Army. They proved that they had the proper dedication and motivation and everything like that to be soldiers. So you get over 200,000 African Americans enlisting in the Union Army after the Battle of Fort Wagner. As you know, crucial numbers into Lincoln winning the war. Not only that, but you actually get this sculpture being put up in 1897 by a French sculptor by the name of Auguste Saint-Gaudens. Saint-Gaudens was one of the remarkable men around this time because when he's asked to do this monument, he's simply supposed to do a guy on the horse. But what Auguste Saint-Gaudens does is that he contacts Shaw's family. Which is how would you like your son to be depicted on this memorial? That's when you get Shaw's family telling Auguste Saint-Gaudens the true history of the 54th. And that's when you get Auguste Saint-Gaudens adding the men of the 54th Regiment. And if you ever have time to go to downtown Boston or even Carnegie, New Hampshire, or even the National Mall in D.C., you can see a replica of this 54th monument. You'll see all the original black faces because he actually recruited men off the streets of New York to model for this memorial. Not only that, but you'll see the great detail in it, and also the lady above. Actually concludes our talk today. Any questions, anything like that?
What year was it?
It was revealed in 1897. Originally, he was just supposed to take 2 to 3 years to do it, but it actually takes him 14.
Wow, pretty impressive.
Yes. He does it 3 times too, so it's even more interesting.
Where's the third one? Cornish, Boston, and...
National Mall, DC.
Oh,
Last time I was on a duck tour in Boston, the driver specifically stopped right next to that mural so that we could see it.
Yeah, it's really detailed. Like, I'll go back to it. You'll see the lady above. He never gives her a name. He calls her the floating lady. But however, in her arm, she has 2 things though. One is laurels to represent victory, and another thing is poppies, which represents death. So poppies and laurels. So she could be the angel of victory or the angel of death. Not only that, but he adds a Latin saying over here in the corner, meaning he who relinquished all to save the republic. Meaning he who gave up everything just to save their country. And that's what the men of the 54th pretty much did. Because not only the men of the 54th, they was going into war, but not only that, but they're not being paid. These men actually decided to refuse pay for 18 months. And the reason that they refused pay is that Lincoln was not willing to pay them equal pay as white soldiers. And when white soldiers were receiving 13, Lincoln was willing to give them 10. So these men, as a unit of 1,006 men, they refused pay. So that means even during the Battle of Fort Wagner, which happened July 18th, 1863, they're not being paid. They're fighting this war simply off of principle. So he who gave everything to save their country. Not only that, but like if you even go to the monument, if you stand by the horse, you'll see faces behind the horse. It's a really well detailed monument. Any other questions, anything? Yes.
Are these soldiers enslaved blacks?
No. They was not enslaved black. They actually came from all different walks of life, but majority of them was actually free. Some of them come from the Beacon Hill neighborhood, some of them coming from Europe. 1 or 2 coming as far as from Europe. Some coming from the Caribbean and all over the United States. One of the main recruiters of the 54th was Frederick Douglass. So you actually get him writing in his newspaper, the Men of Color speech. And that speech is being passed around the country, telling men to come to Massachusetts to join the 54th Regiment. And the 54th was so big that they had to start at 55th. So, yes.
Sorry, I know we were late, so I don't know if you covered this or not. I've read conflicting accounts as far as how Shaw was buried. One saying that his parents wanted him buried with his men, another saying that the Confederates buried him with his men as a slight to him. So I just wondered what the truth was. So
They're both true.
Okay.
Both. Because when he is shot at the Battle of Fort Wagner, the Federal Army do throw him in a mass grave. They throw him on the bottom and throw his men on top of him. But when the war's over, the Union troops say, "We found your son's body," to Shaw's family. And Shaw's family says, "Leave him there. He'd rather be buried with his men." So it's kind of both that they found him and did do the mass grave. So it was a choose both. Any other questions? No? If you ever have time, come down, see us with the Black Heritage Trail right in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. This summer's gonna be really interesting because we have a lot of different tours and different programs happening over the years. At our table over here, you'll see some newsletters, brochures, and pencils if you want to take those. So we have overall good information happening right in the Beacon Hill neighborhood. So come down to see
This
it.
is the 150th anniversary this year, right?
Yes, of the Civil War.
Actually, that's a good point. We do have for the sesquicentennial of the Emancipation Proclamation, May 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. We do have a series of programming. The second
When you say we,
National Park Service. Actually, I
Okay,
work with the
okay,
two of them. I'm
okay.
sorry. I'm also a Groveland resident, though,
Yeah,
so
I
I'm in my
know.
Grovelandite phase right now.
No, she's gonna have it in her house, okay?
Right up, just up around the corner. At the African Meeting House, there is a Eric Foner. There's going to be a lecture by Eric Foner that Thursday evening. Friday day is at the Radcliffe Gymnasium at Harvard. There's an all-day symposium, something like 30 different academics coming. But on the Saturday at Tremont Temple, they've commissioned a special piece on, oh my goodness, Haiti,
Yeah, oh yeah, okay, yeah. That, Revolution in Haiti.
the revolution in Haiti, but the tie between the revolution in Haiti, the Civil War, and Black emancipation in the United States. And they're all free. You can come to the website. The information is up here. I'll give the website. You can go to the website, find out information, or just call the site if you're interested in anything.
your office is right on Beacon Hill?
Pretty much kitty corner from the State House.
If you ever have time, also come right down here to the African Meeting House. The African Meeting House is open to the public. We do tours from 11 to 3. And we'll get a park ranger giving you a nice little talk about the overall purpose of the building. Then also you get to see the building physically and everything like that. Because it just reopened December 6, 2011. And it's been closed down for about 7 to 8 years.
Really? I just got to go about a month ago. And you had a lot of Martin Luther King photos. Is that change?
That's the current exhibit right now at the A.B.L. Smith School, but however it will change.
I think it starts coming down the 25th of this month, and then Freedom is Rising, focusing on the Civil War and the 54th.
Yeah, and the Robert Shaw, I think that starts like the second week
Beginning
of
of,
March.
yeah.
So right now we're about to go through our transition phase, but
When was that school in operation?
from 1835 up until 1855, and then it shuts down for a couple of years after that and reopens in 1858. That's an integrated school.
And this is as early, the 1806, did you say?
Yeah, this is the African Meeting House. You get remarkable people talking here also. You get Frederick Douglass speaking here, and you get William Lloyd Garrison coming here to start the New England Anti-Slave Society. Not only that, but you also get one of the first female speakers happening. In the 1830s, a woman by the name of Maria Stewart. She actually is one of the first to give a speech in front of a co-ed crowd. Not only that, but she's the first to give the speech overall. So she does 4 speeches over the course of her time and things like that. But however, she was kicked out of the city because her speeches are just too powerful. She talks about women's rights and everything like that, telling women to educate their...
Shame on her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She's telling women to educate their daughters with beyond womanly duties. She's telling them to educate their minds.
Oh,
So
no.
this happened in the 1830s. No. So she starts this women's rights movement right here in this community in the 1830s, where the women's rights movement in our country really don't get into play until after slavery, after Reconstruction. So around 1877, that's when we start to see a true women's rights movement in this country. But she starts it right here in the 1930s.
When was this building sold again?
You actually get this building when the black community actually leaves Beacon Hill around the early 1900s. And you get this building being sold to a Jewish synagogue in 1904. And it lasts a Jewish synagogue up until the late 1960s. Then finally in 1972, that's when you get the Museum of African American History purchasing this building. Making it part of the Black Heritage Trail tours and things like that. Not only that, like I said, the building is really remarkable. If you walk in there, the floors at the bottom are the original floors of the building. And they date back to 1732. The floors, because they buy these floors secondhand from the Old West Church. So Other than that, the pews you're looking at are all replicas, but once you get inside, you will have a chance to see original pews and things like that.
We call them the Weight Watcher ones. They're
Yeah,
a little
that is-
smaller than the modern ones.
Yeah, you can tell the difference once you walk through there. And also they have numbers on it to show you that difference. But come on down and see us. It's not that far, really. So, any questions? Thank y'all for coming out.
That was it.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem. Have fun.
And it's, you're on Beacon Hill, right on Beacon Street.
Yeah, thank you all very much for coming. And they have lots of literature over here that you're free to take. And
I know where you are.
Yeah.
We're in the same building as the Congregational Library.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the congregation's on 6th.
The website is www.nps.org.
We have steakhouse, we have the other office, like, nope, down the street, wait.
It's around behind.
And if somebody gets on,
Literature will be available in the library.
the literature will be available here at the library.
Seriously, it's like a huge box.